Earth right now spins silently through the dark, while human beings illuminate small screens to observe the cosmos. Look closely at a modern high-resolution photograph capturing a distant stellar system. 100 billion nuclear furnaces burn together in a spectacular display, generating immense collective energy. Glowing spirals visually dominate the frame. Radiant cores project an intense, almost blinding warmth across the digital display. To our earthly eyes, the resulting picture portrays a heavily populated environment. Every centimetre inside the rendering suggests a densely packed neighbourhood where celestial bodies practically rest against one another. Human vision instinctively identifies what appears to be a crowded metropolis composed from burning gas. Yet this visual achievement carries a profound structural deception. The breathtaking portrait we admire so deeply serves as a necessary lie. Before dismantling this visual interpretation to understand the actual architecture holding these stellar systems together, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our journey, and take a deep breath. We are going in. Generations have grown up relying on these specific visual maps to construct a mental model regarding outer space. Classrooms routinely feature deep field images showcasing Andromeda. Enthusiastic stargazers eagerly share majestic portraits featuring the whirlpool galaxy spinning perfectly face-on toward our observatories. Biological evolution heavily conditions how we interpret these otherworldly vistas. Surviving on a densely populated terrestrial biosphere trained human neurological pathways to process overlapping shapes as evidence indicating physical proximity. Walking through thick forests teaches our brains that interwoven branches and closely standing trunks form a solid physical barrier. Navigating busy city streets reinforces a deeply ingrained assumption that concentrated light sources signify highly congested physical spaces. Pointing our most advanced optical instruments outward triggers these rooted terrestrial instincts. Observers immediately apply earthly spatial rules to the broader stellar neighborhood. Our minds automatically construct a three-dimensional model where spacecraft would need to carefully weave through an obstacle course filled with blazing suns just to cross the galactic center. Long before digital sensors orbited the planet, early civilizations looked up and fell victim to a milder version sharing this same optical compression. Ancient stargazers mentally connected bright dots to draw hunters, animals, and mythical figures across the celestial vault. Modern observers still recognize Orion as a cohesive, flat shape holding together against the dark. Yet the stars forming his belt and shoulders sit hundreds of light years apart along the depth axis. A star appearing adjacent to its neighbor might actually reside 10 times further away from our solar system. The naked eye originally flattened the local stellar neighborhood into a painted ceiling. Deep field astrophotography simply takes that ancient human visual habit and amplifies it to a galactic scale. Humanity essentially traded a flat ceiling for a tremendously bright, equally flat photograph. Human intellect fundamentally refused to accept biological sensory limits. Our natural eyes only process fleeting microseconds at any given moment. They constantly refresh their input, unable to accumulate faint radiation drifting across intergalactic distances. Conquering this biological hurdle required engineering genius. Pioneering researchers invented revolutionary methods designed to harvest time itself. Early scientists spent countless freezing nights operating massive mechanical tubes on high mountain peaks. They carefully guided complex gear systems to counteract planetary rotation, keeping their lenses locked precisely on singular coordinates, while specially treated glass plates slowly soaked up invisible electromagnetic waves. Modern astrophysics eventually replaced those chemical processes with hypersensitive silicon detectors floating silently above atmospheric distortion. These orbital machines stare unblinking at single patches bordering black space for hundreds of consecutive hours. They perform miraculous feats by collecting scattered individual energy packets arriving from remote coordinates. Pushing our vision beyond the local neighbourhood required extraordinary technological leaps. Engineers cool modern telescope sensors to temperatures approaching absolute zero just to prevent the camera's internal heat from drowning out the incredibly faint incoming starlight. Colossal mirrors polished to atomic levels guarantee maximum photon collection. Launch sequences place these fragile arrays precisely in stable gravitational pockets located millions of miles away from terrestrial interference. A powerful desire to uncover hidden cosmic structures drives this monumental effort. Harvesting ancient light represents a tremendous triumph, but interpreting it requires profound caution. The machine does what we built it to do by gathering scarce resources. Correctly translating the dense harvest remains our crucial responsibility. Every telescope functions fundamentally as a giant bucket, collecting scattered raindrops sent by distant stellar engines. Gathering these faint signals and pooling them together into a coherent picture creates the mechanical origin behind our visual deception. Digital sensors operate practically as enormous funnels. They take millions of light years containing physical depth and systematically force all that distance onto a single narrow pixel. Picture the photographic process as a literal funnel stretching across the cosmos. The wide mouth opening this conceptual funnel expands to swallow an entire galaxy measuring 100,000 light years across. As the gathered light travels forward toward our solar system, the funnel dramatically narrows. By the time those ancient photons reach our local orbit, the funnel has tapered down to a microscopic point. It mechanically condenses entire stellar nurseries, sprawling gas clouds, and thousands of isolated planetary systems to share a microscopic square on a digital grid. Consider the journey undertaken by a photon emitted from a star located on the extreme far edge bordering a galactic spiral arm. That specific light particle might travel for an additional 100,000 years compared to another photon originating from a different star positioned on the near edge facing Earth. Both microscopic messengers eventually cross the cosmic void, plunge through our atmospheric shielding, and strike the electronic grid inside an astronomical camera at the same synchronized moment. The instrument faithfully records their combined arrival. It registers their combined intensity. It discards their disparate travel histories. A tiny white dot rendering on a smartphone screen essentially carries the compressed weight belonging to millions of cubic light years. Observing that microscopic point naturally tricks the brain into perceiving a dense cluster. The visual medium fundamentally strips away the depth axis, leaving us blind to the intervening physical gaps. Astrophotography systematically collapses three-dimensional reality into two-dimensional brightness. Looking directly at the blazing central bulge located within Andromeda does not mean you are observing a tightly packed ballroom filled with stars. You are actually staring straight down an incredibly long, transparent tunnel. Your line of sight pierces directly through 100,000s of light years, containing almost absolute emptiness. Along that vast trajectory, thousands of scattered solitary stellar bodies happen to align perfectly relative to your specific terrestrial vantage point. The resulting composite image layers all those distant background objects directly on top of the much closer foreground objects. Photographic technology flattens a deep volume into one flat sheet. This flattening effect obscures the true spatial geometry separating celestial bodies. Staring at a continuous wall radiating intense luminosity inherently tricks the mind into assuming the territory remains filled to the brim. Our rational intellect must decisively step in where our raw visual perception fails. Advanced mathematics provide the tools required to deconstruct the image and calculate the actual geometry hiding safely behind the glow. Scientific calculations prove that the intense luminosity results purely from stellar quantity rather than their physical closeness. A brilliant white patch shining on a computer monitor represents an optical trick driven by perspective rather than a genuine physical cluster. The dishonesty is in the compression. Squeezing a cosmic structure onto a rectangular screen inadvertently erases the defining spatial characteristic governing the universe. Celebrating the collected brightness often causes us to miss the vast context, allowing that brightness to travel. Appreciating the structural scale defining a stellar system requires us to look far past the glowing pixels. Mentally mapping the invisible gaps deliberately left out by the camera remains our primary task. Our powerful visual tools have successfully charted the glowing anchors scattered across the dark. Now our minds must boldly prepare to measure the distances lying quietly in between. Piercing that brilliant illusion requires stepping away from the photograph and trusting the rigorous calculations compiled by our astrophysicists. Mathematical frameworks quickly reveal a staggering rupture in our visual expectations. When an observer points their cursor at a particularly bright region within the Andromeda Galaxy, they might isolate just one microscopic square on their high-resolution monitor. Glowing with an intense, unified white light, that singular pixel easily appears to contain roughly 1,000 tightly packed stellar bodies. Intuition immediately paints a picture of a chaotic, burning neighborhood where solar flares might intermingle and planetary orbits constantly intersect. Applying spatial geometry to that same digital square shatters this imagined congestion. Researchers have painstakingly measured the physical volume captured by that tiny sliver of resolution. Careful translation of digital boundaries into cosmic architecture reveals that this single pixel represents approximately 400,000 cubic light-years of territory. To understand this measurement, one must rewire how human brains perceive space and volume. If a celestial system houses just 1,000 stars within such a colossal arena, natural laws scatter them so widely that any physical interaction becomes a statistical impossibility. Calculating the mathematical difference between our intuitive assumption of a crowded metropolis and the genuine geometric truth uncovers a staggering discrepancy. Scientists quantify this cognitive mismatch at a factor of roughly 100 trillion. Human neurology never evolved to intuitively process a margin of error scaling to 14 zeros. Consider how earthly beings process scale on a daily basis. When an architect designs a towering skyscraper, measuring mistakes spanning just a few inches can compromise structural foundations. Navigating a ship across an open ocean requires charting currents down to precise nautical miles. In normal daily life, a cognitive mismatch factor of merely 2 or 3 disorients our spatial awareness. Expecting a hallway to run 10 meters long and discovering it stretches for 30 meters creates immediate neurological confusion. Now, apply a mismatch factor of 100 trillion to your immediate physical surroundings. A coffee cup sitting on your desk would not just be further away than expected. It would physically reside on another continent, yet your eyes would stubbornly insist the ceramic mug remains within arm's reach. Navigating a universe built on this level of visual deception demands an extraordinary leap in logical processing. Overcoming such monumental cognitive bias stands as one of humanity's finest intellectual achievements. Rather than surrendering to the misleading glow, astronomers deploy trigonometry, spectroscopy, and orbital mechanics to map the unseen truth. Their equations confidently dictate that galaxies consist almost entirely of empty space. Starlight creates a compelling mirage, suggesting extreme proximity. But physical reality operates under vastly different rules. We perceive a continuous blaze solely because an unfathomable number of individual fires happen to exist along the same vast line of sight, not because they sit anywhere near each other. Quantity fabricates the brightness. Isolation defines the structural truth. Astronomers categorize stars based on luminosity and mass, carefully charting their distribution across the galactic disk. Blue giants burn with ferocious intensity, expending their nuclear fuel in a few fleeting million years. Red dwarfs smolder conservatively, destined to outlive our current cosmological epoch. Looking directly at Andromeda blurs all these distinct stellar life cycles together into a homogeneous wash of pixels. A single microscopic dot on your screen might simultaneously contain the ancient, dying embers of a red giant and the energetic birth of a massive cluster. Because these events fall precisely along the same sightline, digital sensors merge their distinct identities into one unified signal. Human analysts must mathematically unweave this tangled light. Dissecting the spectrum allows scientists to separate overlapping layers, effectively peeling back the two-dimensional curtain to reveal hidden depths. Every time a researcher successfully calculates an accurate trajectory leading to a specific variable star, they strike a victorious blow against the optical illusion. Interstellar isolation stretches unimaginably deep, and grasping it requires abandoning astronomical units to translate cosmic gaps into familiar terrestrial scales. Imagine boarding a standard commercial airliner, the type of vehicle transporting millions of passengers across continents every single day. Cruising at an altitude of 30,000 feet and maintaining a steady speed of roughly 900 kilometers per hour, this flying machine represents a pinnacle of human mobility. Now, transplant that familiar aircraft into the interstellar medium, positioning its wings just outside our solar boundary. Point the nose toward Proxima Centauri, our nearest neighboring stellar engine. Pushing the throttles to maximum cruising velocity, the great journey begins. Generations would rise and fall as the craft travels forward. Civilizations could emerge, build towering monuments, discover advanced technologies, and eventually fade into archaeological dust while the plane continues its relentless transit. Flying continuously without a single pause, moving through a complete vacuum devoid of friction or atmospheric resistance, the aircraft must maintain its course for approximately 5 million years. Throughout that unimaginably long epoch, passengers looking out the reinforced windows would see nothing change. No landmarks would pass by. Celestial bodies would not grow significantly larger in the immediate foreground. The view remains a static, unchanging dark canvas punctuated by distant pinpricks of light, stubbornly refusing to get closer. 5 million years of uninterrupted flight simply crosses the absolute minimum gap separating two adjacent stars in an average galactic neighborhood. Inside the cabin of this hypothetical interstellar flight, the environment remains stable. Without atmospheric friction generating turbulence, the ride proceeds with absolute, uninterrupted smoothness. The engines run silently in the vacuum, leaving no contrails behind. Outside the window, temperatures plunge to just a few degrees above absolute zero. Yet the most profound realization for these hypothetical passengers would not involve extreme cold or total silence, but rather a lack of physical milestones. Moving at 900 kilometers per hour feels fast on Earth because observers constantly watch the ground rushing past. Continents drift away, oceans slide underneath, clouds provide a dynamic frame of reference. Deep inside the interstellar medium, speed loses its intuitive meaning. Flying for 1,000 years yields no visible progress. A million years of continuous forward momentum barely shifts the parallax angle marking the distant target. Proxima Centauri would remain a cold, unblinking dot, refusing to resolve into a distinct, burning sphere until the final stages of the 5 million year marathon. Photographs eagerly promise a tightly knit community of blazing spheres. The three-dimensional reality says empty. Confronting this immense physical separation often triggers a profound psychological shock. Terrestrial minds naturally crave boundaries, landmarks, and tangible connections. Peering into a domain where vast reaches are measured by the time it takes light to travel forces human intellect to stretch well beyond comfortable biological limits. Recognizing this immense stretching should never induce despair. It should ignite a powerful, overriding awe regarding our own cognitive capabilities. A biological species bound to a rocky world orbiting an ordinary yellow dwarf has deduced the precise layout governing a seemingly infinite domain. We cannot physically traverse these gaps, but human reason effortlessly crosses the void. Mind and mathematics calculate the precise trajectory of the airliner, map the exact coordinates marking the destination, and comprehend the underlying physics governing the colossal divide. What fills this vast expanse separating our glowing anchors? To the naked eye, a total absence of matter seemingly dominates the environment. Space between stars presents itself as a flawless vacuum, a pristine theatre where a gravitational ballet plays out in perfect isolation. Modern astrophysics reveals a far more dynamic environment than simple, passive nothingness. The void acts as an active, vital participant driving galactic evolution. It serves as an insulator, protecting volatile stellar engines from mutually assured destruction. If stars actually sat as closely as they appear in digital renderings, gravity would rapidly tear the system apart. Colossal tidal forces would strip away planetary orbits, casting rocky worlds like ours into the frozen depths. Radiation streaming from neighboring stars would scour developing biospheres clean, rendering the delicate chemical processes necessary for biological life impossible. Embracing this reality revolutionizes how humanity appreciates stellar architecture. A galaxy is never a crowded city of light. It exists as an incredibly sparse archipelago composed of tiny, blazing islands separated by vast oceans of nothingness. Glowing spirals so deeply admired by stargazers exist merely as a macroscopic pattern, a large-scale structural illusion visible only when observed from distances spanning millions of light years. Up close, the majestic pattern evaporates. Transported magically to a random coordinate within the densest region of the Milky Way's spiral arm, an observer would not find themselves blinded by a chaotic swarm of neighbouring suns. The sky above would look remarkably similar to the night sky viewed right now from Earth. A few scattered bright points would pierce a profound darkness. The grand spiral structure dissolves when experienced from the inside. It proves to be a macro-scale ghost, an architectural footprint visible only to an outside observer standing far away enough to let staggering distances compress into a single frame. Moving past the illusion of brightness allows true scientific understanding to begin taking root. Exploring the mechanics keeping these isolated islands bound together introduces a deeper layer of cosmic engineering. Bringing this perspective closer to home requires a deliberate descent from the macroscopic architecture defining galactic halos. Passing through the outer boundaries of our local stellar neighborhood brings an immediate cognitive shift. Human minds naturally struggle to process measurements spanning millions of years or distances quantified by the speed of light. Grasping the true physical nature dictating cosmic geometry demands scaling the environment down to proportions our earthly senses can effortlessly navigate. We must build a human bridge connecting the incomprehensible void above to the familiar ground beneath our feet. To transform the solar system into a tangible mental construct, imagine shrinking our central star drastically. Replace the blazing nuclear furnace holding our planetary system together with a standard, brightly coloured basketball. Resting this spherical object gently on the ground establishes the anchor point for a revealing terrestrial experiment. Radiant heat and blinding plasma conceptually collapse into a harmless, textured surface resting quietly on the grass. From this stationary centre, the vast architectural blueprint driving planetary motion begins to unfold across the landscape. A careful measurement of exactly 26 metres across an open stretch of land dictates our next step. Reaching that precise distance allows us to introduce the pale blue dot hosting all known biological history. On this drastically reduced scale, our world shrinks down to the physical dimensions matching a single green pea. Placing that tiny seed carefully onto the soil completes the first critical phase of our localized map. Looking back toward the basketball sitting over 24 paces away instantly shatters any lingering illusions regarding a crowded inner solar system. This short walk vividly demonstrates the defining characteristic governing local space. Between the textured rubber surface and the minuscule green sphere, absolutely nothing exists. No hidden structures bridge the gap. Atmospheric haze does not soften the transit. A person could casually stroll back and forth across that lawn all day without brushing against a solid cosmic object. Solar winds and invisible magnetic fields constantly traverse this expanse, yet tangible physical matter remains absent. Biological life thrives on that isolated P solely because this protective distance prevents the basketball's immense energetic output from incinerating our delicate chemical biosphere. Expanding the localized map pushes human spatial comprehension to its absolute limit. Traveling to the outer edge where giant ice worlds slowly trace their ancient orbits demands a significantly longer journey. Leaving the green P behind, an observer must continue marching outward in a straight line for a staggering 800 meters. Crossing nearly a kilometer of open ground finally brings us to the frigid domain holding the eighth planetary body. Here, we carefully place a small glass marble into the dirt to represent Neptune. Beside that solitary glass sphere, a profound revelation awaits anyone squinting back toward the distant starting point. The basketball barely registers as a visible speck against the horizon. Between the initial anchor point and this distant boundary lies an immense unoccupied territory. Translating planetary mechanics into a sparse arrangement of marbles resting in a vast empty field perfectly illustrates the architectural reality dictating our immediate cosmic neighborhood. We do not reside in a bustling system overflowing with physical interactions. Humanity inhabits a profoundly quiet domain, defined almost entirely by the monumental gaps separating a handful of tiny spheres. Nature frequently utilizes identical patterns across vastly different physical scales. Mathematicians describe this phenomenon through the lens of fractal geometry, where zooming deeply into a complex structure reveals shapes mimicking the larger whole. Snowflakes exhibit precise self-similarity, building complex crystalline branches that mirror their microscopic molecular bonds. Examining a single fern leaf uncovers tiny veins branching outward in proportion to the parent stem. Studying intricate river deltas from high altitudes exposes branching pathways practically identical to the microscopic capillaries pumping blood through biological bodies. The universe applies this same self-repeating mathematical principle to the fundamental layout of physical space. Scaling downward from distant stars to local planets uncovers an undeniable structural law. The emptiness of the galaxy repeats at every scale, from interstellar gaps down to planetary orbits. What appeared as a flawless vacuum between separate solar systems manifests identically within the protective bubble marking our own heliosphere. Macroscopic isolation seamlessly transitions into microscopic isolation, without breaking the underlying mathematical rhythm. The hierarchy of emptiness repeats at every level of the zoom. Extreme physical segregation guarantees planetary stability. Orbital mechanics rely entirely on a scarcity of solid mass. If that vast field holding our imaginary marbles contained any significant debris, the resulting friction would catastrophically disrupt planetary momentum. Moons would rapidly lose velocity, spiraling inward toward their host planets in a fiery demise. Ancient worlds would veer off their mathematically perfect paths, triggering a cascading series of destructive impacts. The pristine void acts as an essential buffer, allowing gravity to conduct a silent, highly predictable symphony stretching across billions of years. Recognizing this repeating geometry stands as a supreme triumph defining modern scientific exploration. Because brilliant minds correctly calculated the precise location marking every isolated marble within that enormous field, human engineers successfully designed robotic emissaries capable of navigating the dark. Launch sequences for delicate metallic probes into the outer system required mastery over this localized emptiness. Plotting trajectories across these distances demands mathematical perfection. A miscalculation of mere fractions of a degree at the launch pad would result in missing the glass marble by tens of thousands of kilometers decades later. Yet, human mathematicians execute these complex equations flawlessly. Spacecraft like Voyager and New Horizons never clumsily weave through a chaotic obstacle course. They sail effortlessly through the mathematical gaps, utilizing planetary gravity wells to accelerate their journey because researchers understand where the void will remain clear. Armed with this fractal perspective, stargazers no longer gaze into a flat tapestry or a deceptively crowded digital photograph. They peer through a meticulously structured hierarchy, built fundamentally upon extreme physical separation. Grasping the monumental scale, isolating the basketball from the glass marble, instills a quiet reverence for the delicate balance holding our local environment together. Biological observers stand upon a minuscule speck suspended within a colossal clearing, perfectly positioned to decode the grander architecture unfolding far beyond our immediate borders. Every upward glance now carries a clear recognition of this repeating structural motif. We observe the glowing stellar clusters shining faintly in the distance and intuitively comprehend that their internal frameworks mirror our own lonely arrangement. The same rules governing our green pea and distant glass marble dictate the precise movements tracing paths around those alien suns. Gravity enforces strict isolation, regardless of whether the scale measures mere astronomical units or spans millions of light years. Formulating these universal laws required countless generations of thinkers diligently measuring shadows, charting orbital transits, and mathematically proving that what lies between the spheres holds equal importance to the spheres themselves. Mastering this cognitive leap celebrates the sheer power inherent within human reasoning. Biological creatures anchored firmly to one solitary pebble have effectively reverse-engineered the spatial framework governing a seemingly infinite reality. Optical limitations initially deceived early observers with promises of heavily populated skies, yet human intellect systematically stripped away the illusion to uncover a more elegant truth. Charting the sparse arrangement of marbles resting in a vast empty field empowers humanity to project its consciousness outward, transcending the biological limits bounding our fragile physical forms. Understanding how space actively separates matter provides the foundation required for visualizing even more complex cosmic phenomena. Pushing outward past the solitary marble representing our furthest planetary neighbor eventually leads toward the boundary where our local gravitational influence wanes, preparing our instruments to observe macroscopic interactions playing out on a grander stage. Scanning the broader cosmic horizon reveals a highly dynamic intergalactic theater where stellar empires constantly drift and inevitably interact. Situated approximately 2.5 million light-years away from our current coordinate, a massive glowing smudge hangs quietly in the northern hemisphere. Telescopic analysis confirms this neighboring structure hurtles toward our Milky Way at blistering speeds exceeding 400,000 kilometers per hour. Mutual gravitational attraction steadily draws these two colossal spiral architectures across the profound intergalactic void. Mathematical models plot their future trajectories, assuring astrophysicists that a direct intersection will occur billions of years from today. Hearing astronomers forecast a galactic collision routinely triggers deep-seated biological alarm. Terrestrial conditioning strictly dictates that any high-speed encounter involving massive bodies must yield catastrophic devastation. Living on a solid planet teaches organisms that when physical objects strike one another, violent destruction naturally follows. Grinding tectonic plates trigger massive seismic upheavals capable of shattering continents. Dropping heavy stones together produces sharp cracks, crushed minerals, and flying debris. Projecting these earthly laws onto celestial mechanics inadvertently forces human imagination to conjure apocalyptic scenarios. Untrained minds instantly visualize blazing suns slamming violently together, vaporizing nearby planetary systems upon impact. Popular science fiction frequently reinforces this dramatic misconception by depicting starships frantically dodging chaotic debris fields while sectors burn in a fiery cataclysm. Rigorous mathematical analysis deconstructs this terrifying illusion. Scaling physical interactions up to galactic proportions introduces a counterintuitive physical reality where speed and mass detach from kinetic violence. When these two majestic spiral assemblies eventually meet, the monumental event will unfold without generating tangible destruction. Scientists confidently project that the structural geometry separating individual stellar engines remains so vast that actual physical impacts simply cannot occur. Astronomers initially confirmed this impending intersection by carefully measuring chromatic variations embedded within incoming light waves. While most distant galaxies drift rapidly away, stretched into reddish hues by an expanding universe, Andromeda actively bucks this macroscopic trend. Its emitted radiation compresses slightly toward the blue end on a visible spectrum, offering irrefutable proof regarding its inbound trajectory. Decoding these subtle wavelengths empowers human intellect to predict events destined to happen eons after our own lifespans expire. To fully grasp this peaceful macroscopic integration, picture an incredibly voluminous enclosed sports stadium. Deep inside this immense concrete structure, imagine a single cloud containing perhaps 100 tiny mosquitoes drifting aimlessly near the northern bleachers. Far away, hovering quietly near the southern end zone, a second, identical swarm maintains its own tight formation. Slowly, a gentle atmospheric current pushes these two biological clusters directly toward an exact midpoint spanning the arena. Moving relentlessly closer, their flight paths inevitably cross. Because the stadium interior offers such an overwhelmingly vast volume compared to the microscopic bodies belonging to the insects, the two swarms ghost right through one another. Not a single fragile wing brushes against another. No mid-air collisions disrupt their delicate trajectories. Individual insects seamlessly thread the needle, continuing their forward momentum untouched by their incoming counterparts. Galactic mergers operate according to this exact same geometric principle. Rather than behaving like solid frisbees smashing destructively together in mid-air, spiral galaxies function as unbelievably loose aggregations composed almost entirely from vacant space. Our Milky Way and the rapidly approaching Andromeda system represent nothing more than two highly dispersed swarms of brilliant macroscopic mosquitoes flying directly through an unfathomably massive room. When their glowing outer edges finally brush against one another, observers would hear no grinding crunch echoing through the dark. Explosive shockwaves will never materialize. Stellar bodies will merely intermingle across the vastness, bypassing one another by margins spanning trillions of kilometers. Human perception instinctively links the word collision with sudden, violent immediacy. Speeding vehicles crashing on a highway conclude their interaction within mere milliseconds. Falling meteors strike terrestrial soil in one blinding flash. Merging two galaxies requires a timeline spanning roughly 2 billion years from initial contact to final stabilization. Evolutionary branches could rise, flourish, and naturally extinguish themselves, while the two glowing cores leisurely circle one another. Glacial pacing entirely redefines how we must conceptualize a physical event, stretching a single interaction across immense geological epochs. Although the individual suns safely avoid direct physical contact, their collective masses still exert profound gravitational influence over the unfolding architecture. Navigating this complex gravitational ballet requires immense processing power, prompting researchers to utilize sophisticated supercomputers capable of rendering millions of simultaneous orbital equations. Digital simulations reveal how invisible forces will radically distort both structures as they gradually overlap. Intense tidal forces will slowly stretch our familiar spiral arms out into elongated ribbons, sweeping deep into previously uncharted intergalactic territory. Astronomers refer to these striking new geometric arrangements as tidal tails. Millions of lonely, isolated suns will find themselves pulled out from their ancient orbits, cast beautifully into sweeping arcs, fundamentally redrawing the local map. Future generations, standing upon terrestrial soil, would bear witness to a glorious celestial display. Over countless millennia, a second glowing band formed by milky light would gradually emerge across the night sky, steadily growing brighter as the intervening distance closes. Familiar constellations mapping human history would warp and stretch as unfamiliar neighbor stars slide silently into our hemisphere. Reaching the climax during this reorganization, a brilliantly chaotic web featuring interwoven stellar rivers would eventually dominate the sky from horizon to horizon. Looking upward would reveal a furious, visually turbulent tempest woven entirely from ancient light. Beneath that visually chaotic canopy, physical tranquility will continue reigning supreme. Planetary inhabitants might feel terrified gazing at a sky seemingly tearing itself apart, yet their local solar system would remain intact, undisturbed by the macroscopic drama playing out above. Solar planets will continue executing their flawless ellipses around host stars, blissfully ignorant regarding the monumental structural shift occurring across the broader galactic neighborhood. Only the sprawling, highly diffuse clouds composed from interstellar gas floating loosely between the stars will actually experience true physical friction. Immense wisps containing dormant hydrogen will gently compress as the two cosmic structures slide through one another. Squeezing this material triggers a highly productive wave, generating tremendous stellar birth. Fresh nuclear furnaces will continuously ignite deep within these collapsing gaseous pillars, illuminating the newly forming galaxy with brilliant blue radiation. Even this highly energetic process unfolds silently across millions of years, serving as a constructive mechanism rather than a destructive anomaly. Calculating probabilities involving stellar collisions during this colossal merger heavily underscores the true physics dictating cosmic spatial dynamics. Researchers estimate that out of nearly 1 trillion combined stars participating in this grand intergalactic handshake, perhaps fewer than half a dozen might actually experience a direct physical strike. Translating those odds mathematically produces a statistical outcome so infinitesimally close to zero that engineers practically discard it. A seemingly catastrophic collision, therefore, transforms effortlessly into a majestic, slow-motion reorganization. Two distinctly separate spiral entities will patiently fold together, slowly settling into a brand new, highly stable elliptical configuration. Trusting sophisticated calculations over ingrained biological fears represents a monumental triumph regarding human intellectual capability. We possess the remarkable ability to sit quietly on a tiny rock, stare directly at a massively approaching celestial body, and logically deduce that its arrival brings no physical danger. Decoding precise mechanics governing such a colossal event allows our species to appreciate the sheer elegance dictating cosmic evolution. We do not need to cower in fear while observing the heavens shift. Mathematics grants humanity a front-row seat to the greatest architectural remodeling project occurring anywhere in our local cosmic neighborhood. Physical reality dictates a peaceful transition precisely because the monumental gaps we previously charted serve as an unbreakable protective shield. What naturally appears as a terrifying void to an untrained eye actually functions perfectly as a vital, life-saving buffer. Recognizing this protective dynamic alters how we must view the dark patches resting between the glowing pixels. Immense physical separation guarantees that hundreds of billions of fiery spheres can flawlessly weave through an equally massive approaching fleet without triggering a single meaningful impact. Vast expanses stretching across light years ensure that delicate planetary systems survive complex gravitational realignments unscathed. The emptiness preserves them. Stepping intellectually into this protective expanse introduces a sensory reality profoundly alien to terrestrial biology. Stripped entirely of the dense atmospheric gases enveloping our homeworld, the intergalactic medium functions practically as a flawless sensory deprivation chamber. Earthly environments hum with relentless vibration. Wind rustles through thick foliage. Oceanic tides crash violently against continental shelves, and tectonic shifts rumble deeply beneath our feet. Biological organisms evolved specifically to process these mechanical waves, relying constantly on vibrating air molecules to transmit crucial information regarding approaching predators or shifting weather patterns. Leaving the planetary boundary leaves all such acoustic phenomena permanently behind. Sound demands a physical medium to propagate, requiring a continuous chain of molecules to bump against one another in a rapid kinetic relay race. Crossing into deep space instantly severs this mechanical chain. Out in the vast stretches separating celestial bodies, matter becomes so unbelievably scarce that individual atoms rarely encounter one another. A screaming explosion equal to 1 billion nuclear detonations could erupt on a distant sun, violently ejecting millions of tons of superheated plasma into the void. Standing just a few thousand kilometers away from the blast, a hypothetical observer, equipped with perfect thermal shielding, would experience absolute acoustic zero. No deafening roar would tear through the environment, no concussive shockwave would rattle their bones. Without a dense molecular web to carry vibrations forward, acoustic energy simply has nowhere to go and no mechanism to travel. Physics enforces an inescapable quiet upon the cosmic theatre. This profound stillness does not represent a mere absence of noise, but rather a fundamental geometric property defining the universe itself. The silence is the structure. It acts as the foundational blueprint, allowing vast distances to exist without collapsing into chaotic, overlapping interference. Navigating this unyielding quiet requires a completely different mechanism for information transfer. Only electromagnetic radiation possesses the unique physical capability to traverse the absolute vacuum without requiring a tangible medium. Unbound by any need for vibrating atoms, light propagates continuously forward, riding self-generating electric and magnetic fields perfectly suited for crossing the abyss. Consider the remarkable odyssey undertaken by a solitary photon. Birthed deep within the crushing gravitational furnace of a distant blue giant, this microscopic packet of energy violently fights its way outward from the stellar core. Escaping the turbulent plasma corona, it suddenly breaches the outer boundary and plunges headlong into the interstellar medium. Our photon effectively enters an unimaginably colossal, perfectly quiet room. Gliding forward at exactly 299,792 kilometers per second, the tiny messenger embarks on a marathon spanning deep time. 10 millennia pass silently. 50 millennia fade steadily into history. For 100,000 consecutive years, this singular particle of light flies straight through the dark architecture. Throughout that entire epoch, traversing distances that would break the human mind to physically measure, the photon never brushes against a single stray hydrogen atom. It never grazes a wandering speck of cosmic dust. Sailing unhindered, the particle preserves the precise physical data concerning its explosive birth. It carries the chemical signature of its parent star, locked safely within a specific wavelength, functioning basically as an immortal courier tasked with delivering a message across an impossibly wide chamber. Understanding this uninterrupted transit completely redefines human appreciation for celestial observation. When stargazers tilt their heads backward on a clear, cloudless night, they are not merely passively receiving terrestrial illumination. They are personally serving as the final destination for a 100,000-year journey that occurred entirely within a pristine, undisturbed corridor. While individual photons maintain their inherent energy levels during this endless flight, the collective light emitted by the parent star faces a relentless mathematical adversary. Propagating outward in all directions simultaneously, the stellar glow expands like a continuously inflating spherical bubble. As this geometric sphere grows larger, the original finite amount of light must spread thinly over a rapidly multiplying surface area. Physicists define this undeniable mechanism as the inverse square law. Doubling the physical distance from a glowing source does not merely cut the perceived brightness in half, it dilutes the intensity across 4 times the area, plunging the luminosity to a mere quarter of its original strength. Moving 3 times further away slashes the visual power down to 1/9. By the time that expanding bubble of radiation finally reaches the outer edges of a neighbouring planetary system, the brilliant thermonuclear roar has decayed into an incredibly faint visual whisper. Vast geometric expansion systematically drains the intense visual power from the cosmos. Entropy manifests here not as a destructive force ruining the celestial landscape, but as an elegant, highly predictable dispersal of energy stretching infinitely outward. Signals dilute endlessly across the sprawling architecture. This rigorous mathematical reality explains precisely why the night sky remains fundamentally dark despite housing billions of burning reactors. The sheer volume of nothingness overpowers the collective output of every stellar engine combined. Space expands far more aggressively than light can possibly illuminate it. Faced with such overwhelming dilution, biological eyes stand practically defenseless. Terrestrial retinas lack the sheer surface area required to catch enough fading messengers to accurately reconstruct the distant source. Because nature designed our optical receptors exclusively to track nearby terrestrial movements under a blazing local sun, watching the broader universe naturally exceeds our biological mandate. Yet, where evolutionary biology halts, human intellect brilliantly takes command. Recognizing the harsh physical constraints imposed by the inverse square law, visionary engineers design mechanical eyes stretching dozens of meters across. Constructing enormous parabolic mirrors allows us to physically widen our sensory net, intentionally intercepting a vastly larger fraction of that rapidly fading spherical bubble. We mathematically counter the cosmic dilution process by building artificial retinas capable of hoarding the sparse, scattered rain of incoming photons. Decoding these highly weakened signals proves to be an absolute masterclass in intellectual resilience. We actively refuse to be isolated by the sprawling geometry separating the stars. Translating a faint electromagnetic whisper into a detailed chemical analysis mapping an alien atmosphere demonstrates a cognitive triumph. Humanity reaches across the silence without leaving its planetary cradle. We expertly calculate the exact rate of dilution, mathematically reverse the fading process, and accurately reconstruct the distant celestial source with flawless precision. Living deliberately within an environment where physical isolation is built directly into the fundamental rules of existence forces a profound philosophical recalibration. Deep space is not an ocean to be swum, nor a landscape to be casually walked. It exists primarily as a medium of extreme sensory deprivation, enforcing rigid speed limits on how fast any interaction can physically unfold. Understanding that light itself requires thousands of human generations just to cross a single galactic neighborhood firmly anchors our logical expectation regarding the natural world. Information travels agonizingly slowly when measured against the colossal scale characterizing the quiet room. Rather than feeling diminished by the delayed echoes arriving at our telescopes, we should wildly revel in our unprecedented capacity to hear them at all. Every successful astronomical observation represents a stunning intellectual victory over the geometry of nothingness. We meticulously gather ancient light that has weakened by factors of trillions, processing these surviving fragments to map exotic environments we can never physically touch. The quiet room strictly dictates the physical boundaries mapping what biological senses can natively perceive, yet it completely fails to cage the inquiring human mind. Abstract thought effortlessly spans the dark gaps, connecting the scattered, diluted data points into a cohesive, mathematically perfect blueprint. Embracing the profound sensory void allows researchers to tune their instruments precisely to the correct frequencies. Stripping away the terrestrial noise ensures that when a faint signal finally arrives, it stands out with crystalline clarity. We build our observatories on extreme mountain peaks and launch delicate glass sensors into high planetary orbit specifically to escape the chaotic atmosphere wrapping our homeworld. Seeking the quietest possible vantage point becomes paramount to conducting accurate science. By intentionally stepping into the silence, astronomers guarantee that every captured photon tells its complete, unedited story. The vacuum strips away all interference, leaving behind a perfectly transparent medium where the fundamental laws of physics can be observed, operating with flawless mathematical grace. Appreciating this immaculate transparency reveals a universe intricately designed to preserve its own history. Because the void remains vacant, ancient radiation originating from the very dawn of time continues drifting across the cosmos, untouched by degradation. Deepest emptiness fundamentally acts as a flawless historical archive. It securely holds the migrating light belonging to dead stars, ancient galactic mergers and primordial cosmic expansion. Understanding how carefully the void protects these fading signals prepares human observers to investigate the unseen scaffolding holding the entire majestic structure together. Humanity inherently gravitates toward illumination simply because biological retinas evolved exclusively to harvest photons. Scanning the night sky heavily reinforces a deeply ingrained assumption that glowing radiation equals physical substance. We instinctively tally burning suns and vibrant nebulae, confidently cataloguing these radiant bodies under the mistaken belief that our lists account for the total celestial mass. Yet measuring a galaxy exclusively by its luminous output equates to surveying a sprawling continent by only mapping the streetlights scattered across its surface. Luminous matter accounts for a remarkably small fraction constituting the actual cosmic architecture. Brilliant spiral arms, eagerly captured by digital sensors, serve merely as decorative tracing paper laid gently over a vastly more substantial blueprint. To genuinely comprehend stellar mechanics, our minds must now detach from the comforting glow and willingly plunge into an immense, unlit ecosystem making up the true galactic bulk. Visualizing this profound ratio requires discarding the flat photographic charts we previously analyzed. Picture instead a small, heavily textured walnut glowing softly with an internal warmth. This compact, wrinkled seed contains every single blazing star, swirling gas cloud, and active stellar nursery visible to our most powerful optical instruments. Now, mentally place that radiant seed directly into the core of a colossal, perfectly transparent fruit. The invisible, fleshy exterior surrounding the tiny center stretches outward for 100,000 of light years, devoid of any illumination. Stargazers enthusiastically photograph the luminous walnut while remaining completely oblivious to the enveloping mass. The visible galaxy is merely a small, glowing walnut resting inside a massive, invisible fruit. This enveloping dark sphere possesses staggering gravitational weight, silently dictating the orbital velocity shaping the radiant core spinning deeply within. Exploring this unlit territory introduces physical phenomena defying all traditional planetary models. Standard astronomical textbooks frequently depict solar systems as highly orderly arrangements where rocky worlds remain permanently tethered to a central nuclear furnace. Reality harbors a far more nomadic population. Roaming freely through the pitch-black corridors lying far beyond established constellations, billions of rogue planets drift untethered from any host star. Ejected violently during chaotic early solar system formations, these solitary wanderers traverse the galactic disk in perpetual midnight. Lacking a local sun to bathe their surfaces in external warmth, they emit no detectable visible radiation. Some exist as barren frozen rock, while others manifest as massive gas giants, retaining immense internal heat generated purely by gravitational compression. Imagine placing a hypothetical observation deck into orbit around one of these rogue gas giants. No blinding sunrise would ever greet the morning. The local horizon remains permanently submerged in a dark, cold void punctuated only by extremely distant background stars. Yet, beneath the pitch-black upper atmosphere, tremendous physical activity continues unabated. Ferocious storms driven by internal thermal dynamics rage across the gaseous surface, generating spectacular auroras powered entirely by a localized magnetic field. This thriving dynamic environment operates independently from any stellar energy, proving definitively that the absence of light never equates to an absence of physical complexity. Trillions of these dark voyagers slip silently past our telescopes, forming an incredibly rich, unseen demographic, wandering perpetually outside our illuminated neighborhoods. Detectable photons simply bounce off or bypass these stealthy travelers, rendering traditional cameras useless. Human ingenuity brilliantly circumvents this profound physical limitation by carefully monitoring distant background stars instead of searching for the wanderers directly. When a massive roaming object perfectly crosses the line of sight between Earth and a remote stellar beacon, its immense mass temporarily warps the surrounding spatial fabric. Traveling light originating from the distant star hits this highly localized gravitational distortion and momentarily magnifies, creating a highly predictable, transient spike in brightness recorded by orbital sensors. Scientists call this exceptionally elegant phenomenon microlensing. By measuring the precise duration and intensity characterizing the sudden flash, mathematicians confidently calculate the exact mass belonging to an object they can never actually see. We map the dark wanderers not by searching for their glow, but by watching them momentarily distort the light emitted by others, turning gravity itself into a powerful observational lens. Wandering planets and dormant dust formations represent only a minute fraction making up the broader, unlit ecosystem. A far more elusive substance dominates the immense invisible fruit encasing the glowing walnut. Mapping the rotational speeds characterizing outer spiral arms mathematically proved that luminous matter simply lacks the necessary mass to hold the structure intact. Centrifugal forces generated by a rapidly spinning galaxy should theoretically tear the outer edges apart, violently flinging individual stars outward like loose debris flying off a spinning wheel. An invisible anchor must exist to provide the crucial inward pull maintaining structural stability. Astrophysicists designate this fundamental unseen architecture as dark matter. Unlike rogue planets forged from familiar atomic elements, this mysterious material interacts with its surroundings almost exclusively through gravitational influence. It completely ignores electromagnetic forces, actively refusing to absorb, reflect, or emit even a single photon. Traversing our immediate physical environment at this very moment, this phantom substance constantly streams through the terrestrial landscape without ever leaving a tangible trace. It passes harmlessly through solid mountains, tectonic plates, and our own biological forms, indifferent to atomic barriers. Acknowledging an invisible framework dominating the galactic mass scale could easily invite philosophical discomfort. However, human intellect thrives precisely when confronted by such monumental mysteries. Rather than dismissing dark matter as an inconvenient mathematical error, brilliant researchers boldly redesign their conceptual frameworks to accommodate the invisible bulk. Recognizing that our sensory limits do not dictate cosmic reality demonstrates a profound evolutionary maturity. We proudly build advanced civilizations reliant upon electromagnetic radiation while simultaneously understanding that the broader universe operates primarily through substances fundamentally divorced from light. Proving the existence of this elusive halo demands scaling our gravitational tools up to macroscopic proportions. While microlensing catches solitary planets drifting locally, mapping dark matter requires utilizing entire galactic clusters as colossal magnifying glasses. Examining deep space imagery often reveals bizarre optical distortions where distant background galaxies appear severely stretched into sweeping luminous arcs. These majestic curves arise because an intervening accumulation of dark matter physically bends the trajectory of ancient photons attempting to cross the vast distance. By carefully studying exactly how the background light warps, scientists meticulously reconstruct the exact shape and density defining the invisible mass causing the distortion. Human mathematicians literally read the shadows cast by gravity to draw highly accurate topographical maps charting territories constructed entirely from an unseeable substance. Mapping this invisible terrain stands as a testament to the indomitable nature characterizing human curiosity. Where our physical eyes fail completely, our mathematical equations shine a brilliant, piercing logic. Theorists calculate the exact mass required to bend a specific photon trajectory, feeding those numbers into sophisticated computers that render three-dimensional models of the dark matter distribution. These digital renderings reveal a complex web of unseen mass connecting the brightest clusters. We effectively draw detailed architectural diagrams charting a substance that refuses to interact with our measuring equipment. This capability elevates astronomy from a simple act of observation into a profound exercise in logical deduction. Entire mountains of dark matter rise and fall across the galactic halo, guiding the gradual settlement of ordinary atomic material into deep gravitational valleys. Galaxies do not simply float randomly through empty space. They accumulate heavily, precisely where the invisible bulk is thickest, riding the immense gravitational currents generated by a completely unseen architect. Combining the nomadic planets, dormant gas formations, and the sprawling dark matter halo revolutionizes our structural understanding. Luminous anchors initially guided our eyes outward, yet the intervening dark physically shapes the entire cosmic theatre. Without the tremendous gravitational binding force provided by the unseen bulk, the radiant stellar engines would scatter aimlessly. We owe our stable planetary orbit to a vast, transparent scaffold we can neither touch nor photograph. The intricate orbital dance performed by the Milky Way relies fundamentally upon partners forever cloaked in shadow. Recognizing this vital symbiotic relationship brilliantly bridges the gap between biological visual reliance and advanced scientific reasoning. Every digital portrait decorating a laboratory wall or classroom projector screen ultimately offers an incomplete narrative. Highlighting the burning gas while ignoring the gravitational anchor severely misrepresents the true celestial anatomy. Radiant cores and sweeping spiral arms provide just a convenient surface layer hinting at a vastly deeper structural reality. The picture captures the bright part. The actual galaxy includes the part that does not photograph. Embracing the complete ecosystem forces a permanent, inspiring shift in how we observe the heavens. Looking upward now requires acknowledging that behind every shining point lies an immensely heavier, transparent domain steering the overall trajectory. Mastering the invisible architecture defining our home galaxy establishes the crucial intellectual foundation necessary for the ultimate outward journey. Charting the dark matter halo brings human observers directly to the absolute outermost frontier, defining our local gravitational territory. Standing conceptually upon the furthest boundary, marking the invisible fruit, we prepare to gaze into a frontier vastly more expansive than anything previously measured. The structural mechanics governing isolated galaxies must now give way to an even grander mathematical reality dictating the space separating entire stellar empires. Understanding the unseen bulk securely prepares human logic to leave the galactic structure behind. Piercing the outermost gravitational boundary hurls our conceptual journey into a profoundly different physical regime. Drifting away from the dense, spinning disk requires passing the final sentinels guarding the cosmic frontier. Ancient globular clusters hang suspended in these remote territories, like solitary fortresses forged during the earliest cosmological epochs. Housing 100,000s of tightly bound ancient red stars, These spherical formations predate the flattened spiral arms by billions of years. Sailing past these archaic outposts provides a breathtaking rear-view perspective of our home galaxy, slowly shrinking into a unified, luminous swirl. Looking forward, however, reveals an environment challenging everything we previously understood regarding spatial isolation. Stepping past the furthest halo markers plunges our perspective directly into the intergalactic medium, a realm where fundamental rules governing matter undergo a radical transformation. Transitioning into this profound expanse triggers a material plummet so extreme that earthly mathematics initially struggles to convey its purity. Deep within a terrestrial atmosphere, a single cubic meter overflows with roughly 10 quintillion gas molecules, frantically colliding against one another every millisecond. Even the seemingly vacant interstellar corridors we previously navigated within our local stellar neighborhood consistently hosted thousands of stray particles per cubic centimeter. Out here, traversing the unfathomable gap separating distinct galactic bodies, that metric collapses. Advanced spectroscopic analysis confidently calculates that the deepest intergalactic medium contains an average of merely one lonely hydrogen atom per cubic meter. Visualizing this physical reality requires imagining a volume matching the size of a standard domestic refrigerator containing absolutely nothing except a single microscopic proton paired with one solitary electron. Such staggering spatial purity ensures that millions of years could easily pass before that isolated atom ever randomly encounters another piece of tangible mass. Far from signifying a tragic wasteland, this pristine environment operates as an incredibly elegant architectural foundation. Navigating such profound segregation allows us to safely chart a course toward neighboring stellar empires without encountering chaotic gravitational interference. Plotting a direct trajectory toward the sprawling Virgo cluster demands crossing 54 million light-years of this near-perfect vacuum. Throughout this unfathomably long transit, practically no massive bodies offer navigational milestones or reflective surfaces. A hypothetical traveler would glide smoothly through endless dark corridors, bathed only in drastically weakened microwave radiation, stretching continuously from the primordial cosmic dawn. Experiencing this colossal geographic feature shatters the crowded illusion generated by early deep-field photography. We finally recognize that stellar agglomerations do not populate the universe in any meaningful density. They exist merely as bright islands scattered across an unblinking ocean of vacuum. Establishing this macroscopic perspective forces a crucial paradigm shift regarding how human observers classify reality. Emptiness is the medium. Brightness is the exception. Luminous matter acts strictly as a rare, highly localized feature safely confined within a boundless, transparent matrix. Accepting this ultimate geometric truth empowers our species to comprehend the grandest architectural blueprint existing in nature. When advanced supercomputers render the observable universe at its absolute maximum scale, individual galaxies lose their majestic spiral identities. They shrink down into microscopic, glowing dewdrops, clinging tightly to a vast, interconnected architecture known scientifically as the cosmic web. Gazing upon this large-scale structure reveals a jaw-dropping network fundamentally resembling a colossal biological nervous system. Massive filaments woven concurrently from invisible dark matter and highly diffuse intergalactic gas stretch across billions of light-years, serving as titanic gravitational highways. Galaxies naturally aggregate continuously along these invisible threads, flowing steadily under mutual attraction toward massive intersections where dense superclusters eventually form. Surrounding these faintly glowing strings lie the true monarchs, dominating cosmic geography. Immense structural cavities known as cosmic voids completely govern the total volume. These spherical regions prove so immense and mathematically vacant that they deliberately defy native human intuition. Plunging directly through a major void could require hundreds of millions of light-years, representing a journey where absolutely no stellar engines illuminate the surrounding territory. Consider the sheer magnitude characterizing the Bootes void, a spherical cavern measuring nearly 330 million light-years in diameter. If our home galaxy mysteriously teleported directly into the dead center marking this colossal hollow, terrestrial astronomers would not have realized other galaxies existed until the invention of powerful telescopic arrays during the 20th century. Looking outward from that specific coordinate, the human eye would encounter no macroscopic structures breaking the darkness. Studying such profound isolation fundamentally rewrites terrestrial physics textbooks. Void environments do not act simply as passive background canvases. They function dynamically as active geometric forces, physically repelling matter outward toward the denser filament edges. Gravitational physics operating on this staggering scale dictates that empty regions naturally expand, while dense regions aggressively collapse. Mapping these dark caverns stands among the most brilliant analytical achievements accomplished by terrestrial minds. Biologically anchored to a dense rocky sphere, astrophysicists boldly utilized redshift technology to measure exactly how fast distant light sources recede from our telescopes. Decoding these stretching light waves allowed researchers to construct highly accurate three-dimensional topographical charts detailing an environment practically devoid of matter. Scientists discovered that the grand filaments only account for a minute fraction concerning the total spatial volume. Absolute nothingness commands over 80% of the observable universe. We systematically charted a domain where absence reigns supreme, proving that human intellect requires no physical proximity to deeply understand the mechanics shaping distant realms. Mind fundamentally conquers distance by translating subtle photographic anomalies into undeniable geometric laws. Tracing our own localized pathway through this sprawling architecture provides a stunning testament to human deductive reasoning. Astrophysicists painstakingly map the precise trajectory carrying our local group, a modest collection featuring Andromeda alongside the Milky Way. Discovering our entire stellar neighborhood actively flowing along an invisible current leading directly toward the Virgo supercluster reoriented our cosmological worldview. We ride an immense gravitational river alongside thousands of neighboring galaxies, silently drifting through the pristine intergalactic medium at hundreds of kilometers per second. Formulating these sweeping kinematic maps proves that our species successfully transcended its microscopic physical dimensions. Charting the invisible currents guiding millions of stars across billions of light years effectively merges the terrestrial intellect with the grandest mechanical processes operating in nature. Understanding how matter travels through the deep vacuum completely redefines human spatial orientation. Dynamic forces actively reshape this monumental web every single second, preventing the architecture from ever remaining static. A mysterious, omnipresent driver, scientifically categorized as dark energy, relentlessly pushes the cosmic voids outward, actively accelerating the expansion rate governing the entire universe. As this fundamental metric stretches the spatial fabric, the distance separating the glowing filaments physically widens. Our brilliantly lit islands steadily drift further apart across the unblinking ocean. Future observers studying the cosmos billions of years from now will measure an entirely different intergalactic topography. Current technological capabilities therefore grant humanity an exceptionally privileged temporal window. We possess the unique opportunity to accurately photograph the cosmic web precisely while its grand, interconnected nodes remain brightly visible and mathematically accessible. Celebrating this fleeting cosmic geometry instills a tremendous sense of intellectual pride rather than existential dread. Human beings effectively function as the universe deliberately generating a localized mechanism to comprehend itself. Constructing massive orbital observatories allows our relatively young species to accurately peer across 54 million light-years and logically deduce the precise physical characteristics defining the intervening vacuum. Recognizing that matter exists primarily as an incredibly rare anomaly, elevates the inherent value characterizing our own physical existence. Biological life relies entirely upon the highly improbable concentration of heavy elements safely tucked away inside a minor spiral arm. We exist precisely because the surrounding emptiness provides a stable, friction-free environment where delicate thermodynamic processes can flourish uninterrupted over billions of years. Gathering this monumental cosmological data prepares our consciousness for a final, profound synthesis regarding our place within the dark. Unlocking the grand geometric truth governing the largest observable scales successfully equips the human mind to deeply reflect upon the meaning behind the silence. Grasping this immense tranquility demands a fundamental cognitive pivot. For millennia, terrestrial philosophers debated whether outer realms possessed a discernible voice. Modern astrophysics provides a definitive, elegant answer, revealing that celestial environments communicate not through chaotic noise, but through absolute, unbroken stillness. This profound quiet does not signify a barren, lifeless wasteland. It acts as a deliberate geometric foundation, a strictly enforced physical condition allowing existence to function harmoniously. Without such a massive canvas, scattered stellar fires would inevitably merge into a single blinding catastrophe. Looking upward requires gazing directly into a structural masterpiece, carved largely by what is missing. Understanding this principle requires us to value the vacant corridors just as highly as the blazing nuclear furnaces. Sculptors working with solid marble instinctively know that removing material creates the final art. What ultimately remains standing is defined by what was painstakingly chiseled away. Macroscopic architecture utilizes this same physical principle on an infinitely grander scale. Unlit domains physically shape the glowing spiral arms, carefully holding incredibly massive bodies apart to prevent mutual annihilation. Focusing exclusively on burning plasma means ignoring the unseen hands actively crafting the local environment. Recognizing unlit territories as the primary cosmic substance flips our traditional terrestrial perspective. Human observers must stop perceiving the dark as a terrifying barrier permanently separating celestial objects. We must instead recognize the unlit expanse as the fundamental connective tissue intricately binding the systemic framework together. Vacuum states represent the ultimate physical truth governing our universe. They provide the smooth, frictionless track enabling ancient electromagnetic radiation to maintain miraculously straight trajectories across deep time. If intervening interstellar corridors contained even a fraction more mass, atomic friction would eventually scrub those delicate visual messages completely out of existence. Radiation relies entirely on this flawless, transparent matrix to successfully relay historical data across unfathomable eons. Nothingness actively facilitates cosmic communication. It gives traveling energy the necessary room required to stretch, propagate, and eventually find its way into our incredibly sensitive mechanical lenses. Far from being an isolating abyss, the vacuum functions as a flawlessly engineered delivery mechanism. It ensures that no matter how incredibly distant a highly energetic event might be, its visual legacy will eventually reach a biologically equipped observer. Standing upon terrestrial soil forces our species to confront a magnificent physical absurdity. Earth represents a shocking, almost statistically impossible concentration of heavy elements. Walking casually across solid ground means interacting with packed matter at densities practically unheard of anywhere else throughout the observable universe. We biologically inhabit a freakish, hyper-dense anomaly. Everything deeply familiar to biological organisms stands in direct defiance to the standard universal condition. Flowing liquid oceans, rigidly solid rock formations, and thickly shifting atmospheric gases represent highly exotic states when measured against the broader intergalactic baseline. Reality's overwhelming majority features absolutely nothing resembling a rocky planetary crust. Acknowledging this intense material rarity should never induce feelings of terrestrial insignificance. It ought to spark an overwhelming, unshakable pride, regarding our unique physical position. Out of an infinitely sparse matrix, natural physical laws somehow forged a remarkably dense, chaotic oasis capable of producing conscious thought. Biological brains perfectly contrast the macroscopic intergalactic environment they tirelessly study, where deepest cosmic voids spread solitary atoms across meters of empty space. Human craniums pack billions of continuously firing neurons into an incredibly confined, hyperdense biological sphere. This intensely concentrated neurological network manages to perform a miracle the seemingly infinite universe fails to achieve on its own. It dynamically comprehends. A mindless, relentlessly expanding vacuum holds no capacity to actively appreciate its own staggering geometry. Glowing hydrogen clouds cannot mathematically calculate their own inbound trajectories. Only through conscious biological entities does the cosmos actually wake up, open a technological eye, and look back at itself. Human beings represent the universe finally achieving profound self-awareness. When a dedicated astronomer meticulously calculates the exact distance spanning to a remote quasar, it is literally the universe figuring out precisely how large it has grown. Decoding the dark parts successfully unveils the true underlying shape driving celestial mechanics. We no longer view distant star clusters as isolated phenomena drifting aimlessly through an uncaring domain. They operate as crucial, interconnected nodes fastened securely to the sprawling, invisible web. Appreciating this vast connectivity fundamentally alters human psychological responses toward the unknown. Confronting an environment dominated overwhelmingly by absolute emptiness frees the human spirit from archaic terrestrial anxieties. We do not need to dread the unlit spaces hanging above our planetary atmosphere. We must fiercely revere them as the ultimate cosmic protectors, the grand insulators granting our fragile biosphere the essential sanctuary strictly required to evolve. Accepting the sprawling void brings an unparalleled intellectual serenity. It teaches our inquisitive species to deeply value the sparse, glowing anchors precisely because they remain so magnificently rare. Sitting safely beside our evolutionary campfire, suspended deep within a profoundly quiet room, we find ourselves perfectly equipped to decode fading signals arriving straight from deepest antiquity. Every massive telescopic array pointed outward serves as a gleaming metallic testament honoring our profound desire to connect. Our orbital machines diligently gather scarce traveling photons. Dedicated mathematicians expertly translate highly subtle gravitational pulls. Brilliant philosophical minds beautifully synthesize these rigorous scientific truths into a coherent, deeply moving understanding regarding our exact place in reality. Profound emptiness, stretching ceaselessly across billions of light years, no longer feels remotely isolating. It feels profoundly inviting, presenting a pristine, unblemished stage set specifically for unbridled human curiosity to endlessly explore. We know exactly what lies safely beyond our dense planetary atmosphere. We thoroughly understand precise orbital mechanics governing the majestic, incredibly slow-motion ballet orchestrating complex galactic mergers. We have successfully charted deeply hidden, invisible territories quietly guiding the grand cosmic web. Humanity fundamentally refuses to be intimidated by the staggering physical scale defining our surroundings. Instead, our intellect expands aggressively outward, easily bridging chasms that physical bodies could never possibly cross. Mind completely conquers distance by translating subtle anomalies into undeniably robust geometric laws. This staggering intellectual triumph completely redefines what it means to be a conscious observer inhabiting a rare, rocky sphere. We are small solely in physical stature, yet absolutely infinite in our boundless capacity to map the unknown. Now, firmly anchored to our profoundly rare and astonishingly precious world, We stare confidently directly into seemingly bottomless cosmic gaps. We recognize the surrounding dark not as a terrifying void, but as the very fabric permitting our existence. Overarching structures deliberately hold us apart from violent stellar engines precisely so we might live long enough to understand them. Every intercepted photon carries a sacred history, a microscopic piece of the grand puzzle, delivered flawlessly across a transparent medium. Gathering these fractured pieces allows humanity to build a breathtakingly accurate mental model encompassing the entire observable universe. Enduring quests for celestial truth represent the highest possible human achievement. We stand unburdened by irrational fears, armed heavily with rigorous logic, sophisticated mathematics, and an enduring awe. Looking up into the night sky finally becomes an act of pure, unadulterated, intellectual communion. We visually bypass deceptive optical compression seamlessly. We acknowledge vast margins mathematically separating burning spheres. We respect the invisible bulk silently steering glowing cores. Our consciousness effortlessly navigates the pristine intergalactic medium, tracing ancient pathways originally carved by gravity during primordial creation. There is no tragic isolation to be found within. There is only a magnificent, perfectly balanced harmony operating on scales that elevate the human mind to its greatest possible heights. We have learned to read the silence, to measure the dark, and to deeply cherish the extraordinarily rare light. The emptiness waits. The light crosses the dark.